Bible Worm, reading the Bible with Bible Worm.
Welcome to Bible Worm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, Professor of Religious Studies at Hendrix College and Theologian in Residence of Canvas Community in Little Rock, Arkansas.
And I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning and Music at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish and one Christian.
This week, we're reading the rich and challenging story of Jesus healing a man blind from birth, as told in John 9, 1-41. The story begins by rejecting the common theology that suffering is a result of sin, insisting instead that this man coming to see is to be a revelation of the glory of God. Yet by the end of the story, we discover not only that this blind man has recovered his sight, but also that the establishment religious leaders, who have thought themselves sighted, have in fact been blind all along. We reflect on the importance of telling one's own truth clearly and of not reducing it to what is acceptable, whether theologically or politically. And we wrestle with the tendency of establishment people, in this text and in our own world, to expel people from our communities rather than listen to what their experiences could teach us. Those who refuse to see will indeed remain blind, but if we open our eyes, it is yet still possible to live in the light. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Amy, it's Bible Worm time.
Hey, Bobby, how are ya?
I am doing pretty good.
This is the state of Amy right now. I have to go back out into the world after we record this podcast, but just for this amount of time, I put on pajama pants. I came home, put on pajama pants, and have to put clothes back on.
You're going to wear them for an hour and 10 minutes.
You know, yes, I am. It is one of those, I need that hour and 10 minutes.
I feel ya. Yeah. Sometimes you just your body has had enough.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Comfort pants. Remember that there was 2 years. There was 2 years when I was just at my house and during COVID, and I just wore pajama pants all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I would sometimes be dressed from the waist up, but just still wearing pajama pants.
All the time.
There was a few things. I mean, I would not want to go back and relive the COVID years, but not having to wear pants, that was a good thing.
The pajama pants was good. Yeah.
All right, Amy. Well, today we are in John chapter 9, verses 1-41, which, as we gestured to last time, is the story of Jesus restoring the sight of a man who was born blind. We were also talking about healing stories last time, and so we'll see some resonances between this text and the ones that we read last time. I just want to notice that we've done a quirky little jump in the narrative lectionary because, the narrative lectionary is keyed on the front end to Christmas and on the back end to Easter. And so when Easter is earlier, the schedule gets compressed. And so we've skipped at least 2 or maybe 3 sort of texts that we could read between John 6 and 8 that we would read in other years if Easter was later. There's some good stuff in there. There's the feeding of the 5,000 in John's version and some things like that. But I think we're just going to encourage our folks to go back and read those chapters.
Yeah.
Listen to old Bobby or young Bobby and young Amy from old episodes.
Younger. We're
younger.
Still young.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. I mean, it totally makes sense, but Easter's earlier, so we're just not going to read those texts.
Yeah.
Okay.
John, compressed John. That was funny when you were younger. What you meant was we are still young, but we were even younger then. And what I heard was
we were never
old
young
then. But we were younger than we are now.
Yeah, maybe that's more accurate.
No, that's really funny. All right. So, Amy, Jesus is in Jerusalem as this story picks up, and I think we're in the Festival of Sukkot. We pick up in the Festival of Sukkot in John chapter 7, and then we're never really said that we've moved on from that. And so maybe we're still in that period. I'm not going to put a lot of weight on that in this interpretation, but it just seems like maybe worth noticing. If we see any resonances, we might just point them out as possibilities.
Great. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Okay. So I'm going to pick up then in John chapter 9, and I am reading in the Common English Bible. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man who was blind from birth. Jesus' disciples asked, "Rabbi, who sinned so that he was born blind, this man or his parents?" Jesus answered, "Neither he nor his parents. This happened so that God's mighty works might be displayed in him. While it is daytime, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." After he said this, he spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and smeared the mud on the man's eyes. Jesus said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went away and washed. When he returned, he could see. The man's neighbors and those who used to see him when he was a beggar said, "Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is." And others said, "No, it's someone who looks like him." But the man said, "Yes, it's me." So they asked him, "How are you now able to see?" He answered, "The man they called Jesus made mud, smeared it on my eyes, and said, 'Go to the pool of Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed, and then I could see." They asked, "Where is this man?" He replied, "I don't know."
I could talk about just this story for an hour. I'm just saying that.
Like just this little part of it?
Just this. Yes, just this.
Oh, well, I kind of just want to let you loose then.
No. You go.
Say some stuff,
You go.
Amy. Here's my first thing is that this story is very clear that this is not just someone who is unable to see, but someone who has been unable to see since birth.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, can you talk to me a little bit about why you think that detail matters?
The first thing that came to my mind when I was reading the text, because it is so sort of like butt up against this question that the disciples ask, who sinned?
Right.
So my first thought was like, well, it couldn't have been him because he was born blind. But I think it's actually more interesting to think about it independent of that and just imagine that this is like a person who maybe doesn't, like if you've never experienced something, it's, I want to say like maybe you don't strive for it or long for it in the same way.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what it is. Nothing was taken from you.
Right.
That you had at some point.
This is just the world you've always kind of known.
It's just the world you've always kind of known. And I say that knowing that this is not, I was not born blind, and so I don't really feel like I can speak to that experience very well. What are you thinking?
I really like that interpretation a lot, Amy. You're making me move metaphorical, which normally I don't do quite this early. But, one of the things that I'm kind of toying with in this text is the sort of metaphorical meaning of light and dark and blindness and sight, which we have been sort of talking about over the last weeks. And, if you read the kind of darkness and light, sight and unsight as, are you born in the logic of the empire? Or are you born in the logic of the kingdom of heaven? Then in that sense, we're kind of all born blind. And we sort of emerge into this world that is just the way that it is. And we don't regret it or know anything about it because this is just all we've ever experienced. And so what is on offer here is sort of a transformation that you don't know you need. And I'm kind of wondering, I'm not sure I'm entirely convinced myself yet, but I kind of like that idea of maybe this is an unsighted person that we can relate to, even if in the literal sense we've been sighted, but in this sort of metaphorical sense, maybe we haven't. The other thing that we'll see about being blind from birth a little later is that people seem to process this as an especially difficult kind of miracle to pull off, as though it's harder to heal somebody who's always been blind than someone who lost their sight. We'll see that a little bit later. I want to come back to this thing that you're pointing out about the question. I mean, the disciples' question is just who sinned? It was either the man or it was his parents. Like it's like a binary option.
Yeah.
Which one is it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough one for me. And we talked about it a little bit in our last episode, I think, that I often read these kinds of comments as a way for people who are not suffering that particular affliction to distance themselves from it and imagine that they have control over whether that thing happens to them or not.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think like sort of, sociologically, I don't know if that's the right word, psychologically maybe. I think that's in the mix.
Yes.
I will say that now this idea that the sins of a parent or the sins of the parents could really disable the next generation.
Yeah.
Again, like I don't want to push us too far into metaphor too quickly, but I think
I have already sent that ship a sailing.
Yeah, I think the invitation here is really open for that, and that is certainly feeling real to me in the world right now.
Yeah.
What kind of world I am leaving? I and my generation am leaving for my children. Like, what are the waters they're swimming in? If they were already born into a proverbial empire, like what are they being pushed into now?
I appreciate so much where you're leading us there. This was a theology in the ancient world that suffering of various kinds was the result of sin, and that there was this, even sort of in Exodus 34, where God says, I visit the iniquity of the parents on the third and fourth generation. And so there is a sense in the biblical text and parts of the biblical text and other ancient cultures that there is this kind of generational punishment. Jeremiah and Ezekiel are both kind of famously trying to wrestle that away and say, no, you're responsible for your own sin. But still there is an equation between suffering and sin. And one thing I really appreciate about what you're saying is that even though that sounds a little ridiculous to us, I think now, I hear people doing it in various ways all the time, as you are saying, especially around my homeless community. It's like, why is someone on the streets? Well, it's either because of something they did, or maybe it's because they were born into a dysfunctional family. Or it's
something their parents did.
Something their parents did.
That's right. That's right.
And that's the end of and I do think it's a distancing in the way that you're talking about. Either like, I want to believe that I'm never going to be in that situation, or I want to have an excuse for why I'm not responsible for that situation. Right. But this theology in a different form is very much still floating around us.
Yes. Yes.
Jesus rejects that idea, or at least, in this case, like neither one. And so I think he's trying to destabilize the whole question, like suffering is either his sin or parents. And Jesus is saying, no, not just in this one case, but like in general. Is that how you read that?
I don't know if I had read it as generalized, but maybe because his comment afterwards, this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I think this is generalized or not, but I could see that possibility.
So what do you think of that next thing Jesus says that you're pointing to? This happens so that mighty works might be displayed in him. There's still a little bit of a utilitarian function to the blindness.
So my more crass reading of it is that because he was born blind, I get to give him sight, and now God is glorified. So I get to swoop in and, whatever. I don't know what I think about that. My best understanding of what it's really like living in community with people who have disabilities is that it is transformational for the community's relationship to God and to what it is to be human. That I don't know how to talk about that space in a way that is, I don't know how to talk about what is happening in that community, but I've heard it over and over and over again, often from parents who have children who are disabled or people who have siblings who are disabled, like a close person, that it is transformational for them. And they do feel that it enables them to see God at work in ways they might not have seen. I don't know which one Jesus is talking about here, but I think they're both a little true.
I really love that second way you're thinking about it as a sort of giftedness to the community. I think that's a really lovely interpretation. The next thing that Jesus says, while it's daytime, we must do the works of him who sent me, that is God. Night is coming when no one can work. While I'm in the world, I'm the light of the world. So there seems to be some urgency that Jesus is feeling about doing God's work because darkness is coming. I stumbled over this a little bit, and so I'm curious how you put it together.
I happen to have read through this text shortly after reading an op-ed in the newspaper about the political happenings in our country, and the op-ed was urging readers to use all of their rights and powers to the fullest, because that is the best thing we can do to sort of keep that window open, like keep the walls from closing in. This is not, of course, saying you can prevent night. Like, that's not the way the Jesus story goes. But that idea that, like, as long as it is day, like, as long as you can do the thing, you have to do the thing. That's how those things got mixed up in my mind and heart as I was reading. So I read somewhere in the intersection of those.
That's really interesting, Amy, because that's also how I have made sense of it. Some people read this as Jesus is saying, like, he's here for a time and then he's going to be crucified and go away. And so you need to do all the things while Jesus is here in his body. And maybe so. Like, I see how people get there. But Jesus, according to John, has been the light of the world since the beginning, and all things came into being through him and all of these things. So it doesn't seem like it's bounded, in my understanding, by Jesus's earthly life. And so then the next move, in my mind, is a move like you have made, which is there are these forces of darkness and misunderstanding or anti-understanding that are in the world that do evil. And so those of us who see the light, like, it is our job to be urgent about the light, about the life, about the love, about the truth. And, while I am in the world, like, in my understanding, Jesus is always in the world from the beginning and in the resurrection. And so this is not about we're going to run out of time, but it is about, like, the urgency of defending light, truth, life now, and that the powers of darkness are real. And sometimes, I feel a little bit like Lord of the Rings or something, but the darkness is like hard. Coming, like night is coming. Yeah. So Jesus announces, "I am the light of the world." This is one of those sayings in the Gospel of John that uses that phrase we've been talking about, ego eimi, I am, which is related to Ehia, Asher Ehia, the name of God in Exodus. So I am, and then he appends a characteristic of himself. I am the light of the world. He does this in other places. I am the bread of life. I'm the resurrection and the life. So I am the light of the world is making a strong statement in some way or another. I'm just curious what you think Jesus, like, how do you take what Jesus has said about himself there?
It's strange. I didn't notice that. I think I was so caught up in the previous sentence, I didn't even notice that I am the light of the world.
Oh,
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
What I did notice is a couple verses later, when the man says, "I am the man," and I wrote next to it, "Is that ego eimi?" I don't know how that changes, how that affects anything, if it affects anything, but it is really interesting to think of that phrase in the context of this gospel as really, like, indicating some kind of, like, something essential about yourself and your power in the world.
That's interesting, Amy. The CEB translation in verse 9 is, "It's me," which doesn't sound like I am at all, but it actually is in the Greek. All he says is ego eimi, and it, and that is exactly that phrase. And one of the issues with that phrase is that is just the normal way that one says, "I am anything." And so, like, is it like a profound theological statement? Or is it just like somebody's talking the way you got to talk?
Right.
And it's not always clear. But it is interesting that I immediately read that I am the light of the world as a profound reference to Sinai. But I didn't make that same move, partly because the CEB didn't draw my attention to it.
Yeah.
But
me. And maybe it is right to pay attention to the ego eimi and the coming from Jesus.
Yeah.
And not in other contexts when it might come up in the gospel.
I kind of like the claiming of one's own, not necessarily him equating himself with God. I think that
No.
probably doesn't go
I don't
anywhere.
think he's doing
But
that.
claiming his own essence, I also am. I think that's kind of interesting. I do read Jesus here as making a connection to God at Sinai, and then this sort of one of the characteristics of him, as we've known since the prologue, is that he is the light that comes into the world, and the light is life, as the prologue has told us. And so in a sense, Jesus is claiming something we've seen all the way through the Gospel of John, just as being the one who brings understanding and the one through whom life comes into the world. Okay, so the story of the way the healing goes is such an entertaining little story.
It is.
The first thing is Jesus spits on the ground, makes a little mud cakes, presses it on the guy's eyes, tells him to wash in the pool. We've seen some miracles in this text already, and one of the things that we have been talking about is how subtle they are.
Yes.
When did the water become wine?
Yes.
When did the man's slave become healed? When did and so now it's mud ball.
This is so embodied. It's so intimate.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the second creation story in a way, when God is forming a human from the dirt and blows air into the human's nostril. It's really, to make a little saliva mud cake and smear it on someone. That is, it's really intimate.
I love that connection to Genesis 2 and the sort of making, and here it's some sort of refashioning or remaking of a person. There is a tradition in the ancient world that human saliva of some people has restorative properties. Vespasian, the emperor, Roman emperor, that was a story about him, is that his spit could heal people. And so maybe this is playing into that idea in some way also. The making of the mud is less clear, what that's doing. Although it's going to become an issue later with the actual making of mud is going to become an issue, as we'll see with the Pharisees. It's actually the washing in the pool of Siloam that is the final point of the healing, though. So I'm curious about any thoughts about the pool or what role that might play in this process.
I mean, my first thought, of course, was just the last story we read, and it's sort of these pools that are right around the temple and the role they played. The pool of Siloam in particular, what I know about it is that it is the end of a tunnel that was built by King Hezekiah, who built these tunnels to provide Jerusalem with water.
Yeah, and it's fed from the spring of Gihon.
Okay. What does that mean? What does that mean for you? Other than this is
it's just why is it a good source of water? Well, it's because it's spring fed.
Yeah, okay.
And so
but it's
sort
not
of
like a magical angel pool like the last one.
No, I don't think it's a magical angel pool. Although I think this is the pool where in the festival of Sukkot, there is water that is drawn.
Yeah.
My understanding is that this is the pool that water would have been drawn from.
So you mentioned earlier that we might be in the period of Sukkot.
Yeah.
Sukkot is a festival where we're thinking a lot about water. We're coming into the rainy season, what we hope will be the rainy season of the year, so the crops will grow. And during the Second Temple period, so the period of Jesus' life, there were rituals, particularly at the Pool of Siloam, that involved a golden pitcher and was carried to the temple and poured out with wine. And I don't know the details of it really, but this pool has a particular role in the celebration of Sukkot. So that's
in a
cool.
celebration of abundance and life and things such as that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, a celebration of abundance and life, and also awareness of things that are temporary and fragile, and our sort of interdependence with each other and with God and with the world. And
I love that. John, likes to set things in festivals and then kind of draw on the imagery of festivals. We've seen it with Passover, and here we see it maybe with Sukkot. And so I like sort of that connection with Siloam, and it's drawing back on Jewish traditions that come from before Jesus and sort of reworking them in a new way as part of this giving of sight.
I love that.
So we have another of these stories when the man comes back and then people can't tell if it's him or not. This is like his friends and neighbors are like, I don't know.
Well, what I was interested in was even the ones who said it wasn't him, they said, no, he only looks like him.
Yeah.
So they knew that he looked like. It wasn't that they didn't know what this guy looked like.
Yeah.
But
I like that.
But it seems like something about him was so like either the way they saw him in the world was so tied up with his blindness that once he's not blind anymore, they just can't see it. Also, it is fair to assume probably that the person who's been blind from birth hasn't miraculously been healed because that doesn't happen.
Right. We've never seen it happen before.
Very often.
So there's a cognitive dissonance or something happening.
Yeah. So if your mind's trying to fill in a blank of like, who is this guy? Like, well, it looks like this guy, except it can't be because he's too tall. Well, it looks like this guy, but it can't be because he can see.
So the man clarifies, ego me, as you're pointing out, it is I. And which it is kind of a revelation of himself. Like they're not sure, and he's revealed that it is. When they ask him how he can see, he just tells the story.
I love that so much.
Why do you love that?
Because he's not trying to offer like, how were your eyes opened? Like you could totally try to offer some like trying to understand the mechanics or like get a little meta about it.
Yeah.
He just tells them exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Like this is what happened to my body on this plane. Here's how it went down. Yeah. And then doesn't try to come up with explanations for the things he can't give a why. Why did that work? I don't know.
And it is almost like word for word. It's not exactly word for word, but it is very close to the way it was narrated before. He's just telling the thing the way that it is. We've seen this in John, I think, a little bit with people's testimonies, that this is, you just say what happened to you. And, then other people can kind of interpret from that what they want to interpret, but this sort of the literalness of it.
Yeah.
When they ask him, where is the man that did this? He says, I don't know, which sort of reminds me of the man who got up and walked. Last time. The difference there was he said, I don't know who it is. And this is, I don't know where he is. So do you have the sense that he knows that Jesus healed him, he just can't find him now? Or that he can't remember who healed him?
I mean, it's a good question because when Jesus was actually like touching his body, he couldn't see.
Oh, that's true.
And then he went down and washed in the pool. And unless Jesus was standing right in front of him,
he hadn't come back to Jesus.
He wouldn't know.
I had never processed that way before, Amy. Huh.
It's a mystery.
Hi, everyone. It's Bobby here from Bible Worm. We hope you're enjoying the podcast. Amy and I started Bible Worm a couple of years ago because we wanted to create a space where we could talk deeply about the Bible in ways that bring together our academic backgrounds in biblical studies and our deep engagement with communities and people of faith. We decided to make this resource free because we want everyone to have access to sound biblical scholarship that connects biblical faith to everyday life. We hope you're finding the podcast fits that need. That said, while the podcast is free, making it is not. Amy and I and the rest of Team Bible Worm spend a lot of time and energy studying, recording, and editing the podcast to make it freely available to the public. If you enjoyed the podcast, and if you find yourself in a position to support our work, we hope that you will consider becoming a Bible Worm supporter for as little as $4 per month. For a bit more, you can also get early access to episodes, weekly liturgies, video Bible studies, join a monthly discussion group, and more. We realize not everyone is in a position to support the podcast, but if you appreciate our work and want to support us, we hope you'll check out our Patreon at patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for more details. Thanks so much for listening, and now back to this week's podcast.
Okay, I'll pick up then in verse 13. Then they led the man who had been born blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus made the mud and smeared it on the man's eyes on a Sabbath day. Pharisees also asked him how he was able to see. The man told them, "He put mud on my eyes, I washed, and now I see." Some Pharisees said, "This man isn't from God because he breaks the Sabbath law." Others said, "How can a sinner do miraculous signs like these?" So they were divided. Some of the Pharisees questioned the man who had been born blind again. "What do you have to say about him, since he healed your eyes?" He replied, "He's a prophet." Okay, Amy, we saw this last time that there's sort of slow roll of the Sabbath again, like we didn't know this was a Sabbath. John keeps doing that. Do you have any?
He does. I mean, the only thing that it felt even more present this time than last time was that Jesus was not doing it intentionally because it was the Sabbath. And again, probably because of the news cycle, but I had this little moment when I read the line that it was a Sabbath, that like I got this little knot in my stomach. Like, can't it just have been easy this time? Like, can't it just have been okay?
Yeah.
Can't Jesus have just stayed inside the boundaries a little better so that this doesn't have to be there doesn't have to be a consequence, Yeah. And I recognize in myself like that's a little silly, but
Yeah.
It hurt me a little bit this time to be like, oh God, again.
Here we go
again with the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Jesus doesn't seem to be worried about that.
Jesus is not worried about that. I mean, it's not clear to me whether Jesus is intentionally doing things on the Sabbath to antagonize.
Yeah.
That's not the way John is telling the story.
Yeah, that's right.
But it happens kind of a lot. So you're like, come on, man. Like, yeah. And it does
know
antagonize.
What day it is? Yeah.
And it gets us back into this conversation that we've had a number of times now about the religious leaders, who in this case are Pharisees, but probably it's helpful to think of them as establishment religious leaders. And Jesus has broken a rule. Here's where I think maybe the mud matters is, like last time, they weren't upset with Jesus that he healed someone on the Sabbath. They were upset with the man that he was carrying his mat.
Mm-hmm.
Here, in the similar way, they're not upset that Jesus healed somebody on the Sabbath, but they are upset that he made mud cakes out of saliva, which is a violation of what Sabbath? Like, there's some Sabbath law against making things.
It's I mean, you kind of have. I don't remember what it's called exactly, but like that kind of like mixing a liquid into something, and you're like changing the state of what it is.
Yeah,
don't do that.
Don't do that. And so that's what they're upset about. But it's so interesting to me because here we get sort of a like, now we've got a problem. Like, this man must be a sinner because he breaks the Sabbath law. And then we've got another response also within the religious establishment, which is, but if he's a sinner, he wouldn't be able to do this kind of thing. And now we've got like an it's more complex than sometimes it is.
Yeah. And it's, I was thinking back to like the magicians who could replicate a lot of the early plagues, and sort of this question of like, at what points the power that someone seems to have that's like not quite normal human power.
Yeah.
At what point you say like, this has to be from God? Because it seems like there is some understanding that like those powers can be dabbled in and not be coming from God, in which case they're coming maybe from something sinister. And so then that's like really an issue.
Yeah. They don't seem to entertain that.
They don't go all the way there, no.
But I see how you get there. They ask the man, "What do you say about him?" Like about Jesus. To which the man replies, "He is a prophet." Any thoughts about that identification as a prophet?
I feel like this is one of those cases where prophet is almost this like catch-all term for like, he's not a normal human. He's closer to God in some way than other people. But as you well know, like prophet means a lot of different things in the tradition. So I guess this would be sort of in the like Elisha kind of prophet.
More than the like Amos kind of
More
prophet.
than the like Amos and Jeremiah kind of prophet, who are, Elijah and Elisha do have like healing stories, sort of these like miracle stories. Yeah, I feel like that is the category that is available given that the history that a Jew at this time would know, like the category of person who can do something like this would be prophet. Because they weren't even thinking a Messiah would do this kind of thing. Like that wasn't their idea of Messiah.
Right, exactly. I think, so they sort of put, like they're thinking, is this guy a sinner or not a sinner? And so they put it to the man who's had this experience himself. And what he says is he's a prophet. So he's not a sinner. He is from God. And he's gotten, partway down the Jesus road of like, who is this person? Sort of like the woman at the well did a few weeks ago. She starts out saying, oh, you're a prophet. Oh, maybe you're the, she finally ends up with like, oh, you're the Messiah. Like there's this little stair step. And so he makes maybe that move. It's so interesting that they divide on this question of, if Jesus can heal, is he a sinner for healing on the Sabbath, or is he from God? And then the solution that they seem to end up with in this next section is that actually this man hasn't been healed at all, which is so fascinating. So I'm going to pick up in verse 18. The Jewish leaders didn't believe the man had been blind and received his sight until they called for his parents. The Jewish leaders asked them, "Is this your son? Are you saying he was born blind? How can he now see?" His parents answered, "We know he is our son. We know he was born blind, but we don't know how he now sees, and we don't know who healed his eyes. Ask him. He's old enough to speak for himself." His parents said this because they feared the Jewish authorities. This is because the Jewish authorities had already decided that whoever confessed Jesus to be Christ would be expelled from the synagogue. That's why his parents said, "He's old enough, ask him." Therefore, they called a second time for the man who had been born blind and said to him, "Give glory to God. We know this man is a sinner." The man answered, "I don't know whether he's a sinner. Here's what I do know. I was blind, and now I see." They questioned him, "What did he do to you? How did he heal your eyes?" He replied, "I already told you, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" They insulted him. "You are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we don't know where this man is from." The man answered, "This is incredible. You don't know where he is from, yet he healed my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners. God listens to anyone who is devout and does God's will. No one has ever heard of a healing of the eyes of someone born blind. If this man wasn't from God, he couldn't do this." They responded, "You were born completely in sin. How is it that you dare to teach us?" Then they expelled him. Where they start is this conundrum that they're in, that either this man is a sinner, but if he's able to heal, then he can't be a sinner because only people who heal are from God, and they get caught. And so they think, okay, maybe he just wasn't ever blind at all. And so they call in his parents. So this interaction with his parents, what did you think about what the parents are up to there?
I mean, okay, when it's just what the parents are saying, I think the sort of narrator's comment on the parents is very interesting. But just what the parents are saying, I love it. They're just so straightforward. They're like, here's what we know. Here's what we don't know.
Yeah. Which is kind of what their son did a minute ago, as you were pointing out.
Kind of, yeah. Like, we're just going to tell it like it is. This made me curious how old the man was.
Yeah, me too.
When they say he is of age, he'll speak for himself. I'm like, is this like a 14-year-old kid?
Yeah.
Or is this... I was still picturing a 38-year-old because I was still in the last healing story that we read. But like, I don't know how old this person was. It got weird for me when the narrator said the reason they said ask him is that they were afraid of the authorities.
Yeah.
Because first of all, that implies that they would have acknowledged Jesus as the Messiah, which I feel like the text doesn't give us anything related to that.
Yeah.
And also that doesn't feel great. You're just going to put it back on your kid and make your kid deal with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with you about what the parents say there, and they're just saying what they know. And he had just said what he knew, and they're not going to say more than they know, and they're not going to speak for their son. Like, I really respect that. And I had the same kind of question as you about, is It makes a difference to me if this kid is newly of age and he's still
Mhm.
living at home with his parents, or whether he's,
Yes.
my age. And
Yes.
then it's like, why go ask his parents? And why not just trust that he says what he knows? Yeah, the only way that this text really makes sense to me is that his parents do know how he got healed. They do know that Jesus did it. And they're afraid if they say that, even if they don't confess that Jesus is the Messiah, if they say that Jesus healed him, the conversation up until now has been, if Jesus healed him, he must be from God.
That's interesting because maybe the man couldn't, or the teenager, however old he is, didn't see Jesus, but maybe the parents
The parents might have.
did. So maybe the parents know the
Yeah.
identity of this person before the son does.
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe the parents have been accompanying him. They've been sort of in the background
Yeah.
along the way, or they saw
Yeah,
the
it really makes a
interaction.
difference. You're right. If you picture that this kid is still living with his parents, he just
Yeah.
is sort of like responsible for his own religious behaviors.
I guess the other way to read it is that the son has told them afterwards, and you're going to believe your kid.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting, this thing you're pointing out, that they are not going to put their own membership in the religious community at risk
Mm-hmm.
to state this on their own. They kind of push it back to the kid. Just the fact of like, in a religious community, there are things you could do to get yourself expelled just by naming your own truth or the truth of someone you love. Like, on the one hand, like, shame on you, Pharisees, is one way you can read that. But on the other hand, or at least an other hand, is like that when you say it, like, sometimes people get expelled from religious communities for stating the truth that they know to be true.
Mm-hmm.
That actually seems like a thing that happens,
Oh, yeah.
not infrequently.
Yeah.
And who might we expel when we can't handle the truth of what they have experienced?
Right.
So the parents have pushed it then sort of back on their son, and they come to the son again and they ask him the same question again. He seems a little exasperated.
Mm-hmm.
And this line in verse 27 where he says to them, "Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?"
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
That seems a little like poking the bear.
Do you read that as the man saying that he's now become a follower of Jesus?
That is a great question. And I don't totally know. I mean, I will say I put a little heart after verse 25. Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know is I was blind and now I see. So like, I know this thing happened. I don't know what this like capital M means about the situation.
Yeah.
And so I could see maybe saying he is a disciple, but in that sort of like, we talked about with some of the other stories, there's like this openness to like, okay, I'm here, you got my attention. I don't exactly know what this means. Like, I don't know what this means. So I guess I kind of see him in that sort of middle state.
I really like that, Amy. And it's messing with my head a little bit because the Gospel of John is sort of famously known for its complex theophilosophical ruminations about the nature of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're saying, it seems right to me, is that what this man and many followers of Jesus are doing in this gospel is just saying, I don't know how to explain it, but I know what I experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grounded in my experience. And you can argue about it all you want, but I know. So I kind of love that this theologically complicated gospel is saying not everything has to be theologically complicated. Just trust what you know.
Trust what you know. And I don't know. And maybe it doesn't have to end there, but like that's enough to start.
The man then gives a kind of a reprise of this argument we were talking about earlier about whether someone is a sinner if he can heal, and if he can heal, he's God. But this time the religious leaders take a different response, which is, you were born in sin. How dare you teach us?
Mm-hmm.
What are they doing there?
I mean, it seems like they're like just rhetorically trying to undercut the whole thing. Like he's got them.
Yeah.
They cannot get out they're trying to find a way out of this sort of logical corner that they feel backed into. They can't get out. So they tried to say like, well, maybe he wasn't really blind from birth. Maybe he can offer some other kind of explanation. And then finally they needed just a way to dismiss him. And so it's like they're tying back to that initial idea of like, why was he blind from birth? There's something in his own origin story that's how I read it, that he was steeped in sin. And so who are you? You don't have standing here.
Yeah, you don't have standing here. And they go back to this sort of stereotyped theology that we dismissed in almost the first verse of this passage. And we came through this complex development, and now we just go back to it. And the sort of the most basic, insulting, stereotyped caricature that means we don't have to listen to you. And then we kick you out. We don't want to talk. You're not one of us. We don't want to talk to you anymore. It sounds to me like the kind of thing that, we hear this sort of thing around today a lot, in which people in positions of authority dismiss and expel people because of their standing or lack thereof, or their positionality.
Yeah, as a way to not engage with their story or their argument or their reality or...
I can't engage you on the merits. I can't engage you on your experience. I can't logically make sense of what you're saying to me. You're a terrible person, and I'm going to kick you out of my community.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll pick up then in verse 35. Jesus heard they had expelled the man born blind. Finding him, Jesus said, "Do you believe in the human one?" He answered, "Who is he, sir? I want to believe in him." Jesus said, "You have seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." The man said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped Jesus. Jesus said, "I have come into the world to exercise judgment so that those who don't see can see, and those who see will become blind." Some Pharisees who were with him heard what he said and asked, "Surely we aren't blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you wouldn't have any sin. But now that you say, 'We see,' your sin remains." I'm so interested that what compels Jesus back to the man is hearing that he's been expelled from the community. Do you have any thoughts about why Jesus comes back to him now?
I feel like the answer that sort of, beckons to me more loudly, or I don't know. Okay, one answer is Jesus is attentive to the vulnerable, and now because of Jesus's act, like Jesus got him kicked out of this community.
Yeah.
So, he feels some responsibility for that. And they both are sort of outsiders now.
Yeah.
They're both unwanted. They're both Jews who are unwanted in the Jewish community.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense to me that they could even just connect on that human level.
I think that's right. One of the things that I'm kind of working on is, you are right that they are both Jews who are not welcome in the Jewish community at this point, but like everyone in this story is pretty much Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of working on this, like, okay, but so what is the difference? And are they people who can see that things are possible that the establishment authorities don't think are possible, or that, there is life and there is healing that can happen that other people don't allow can happen. And so they sort of seen some stuff. They know some stuff that other people can't see and other people can't know. And so it made them unwelcome amongst other people, but they found each other. They know they got to stick together because they can see the world differently.
And the man did also demonstrate an ability he didn't proclaim belief in Jesus in like any kind of theological way, but he was like, look, y'all, this is what happened. I'm not going to change my story because you don't like it. This is what happened.
Yeah.
It takes some strength of character. Maybe Jesus noted that.
I like that. Here, Jesus then says, "Do you believe in the human one?"
Mm-hmm.
So now we move to the issue of belief. Do you believe?
Mm-hmm.
To which the man says, "I want to, but I don't know who he is."
I think it is fascinating that he's having this conversation with Jesus. He has not put it together.
Right.
Like, he's like, yeah, I would believe in the human one, but I don't know who he is. I trust you because you healed my eyes. So can you tell me who he is? And Jesus does.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus has to really connect the last dots for him, but does.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think both the fact that like he trusted that Jesus would answer him and that he asked the question and that Jesus didn't get mad about the question, didn't say, what do you mean you don't know who the Son of Man? You know, like it could have been another response.
Yeah.
There's like a beautiful kind of sweetness about this story, just like a kind of straightforward salt of the earth, you know, tell it like it is.
Yeah. I love that.
Making mud cakes.
Jesus then turns back in some way to engage with these Pharisees, religious leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And we get this kind of reversal motif. I came so that those who don't see can see, those who see will become blind. And the Pharisees kind of hear what's happening, right? And they say, surely we aren't blind, are we? That question just strikes me deeply.
Why?
Because here we have kind of elite establishment people who think they know what's up. And it is just dawning on them that maybe they don't. And I think that feels, I don't know if it's familiar to me as someone who has kind of thought I had it all put together and then suddenly waking up and realizing like, oh, maybe I'm the one who hasn't understood this whole time. It's just like, I just kind of feel for them a little bit. They thought they had it all together.
Yeah.
And now they've just gotten far enough that they can ask that question. Like, wait a second, you're not talking about me. When in fact, that is exactly who Jesus is talking about. And they kind of know it.
Yeah. People who have been really invested in the word of God, the best they understood it.
Yeah.
You know? And as teachers of that word.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually think it takes a lot of humility for them. Even now, like you could say they should have realized this sooner, but like even now to say like,
yeah,
wait, maybe this whole endeavor that I've devoted my life to, not that it has been wrong in its time, but like you can feel the ground sort of shifting under your feet. And that's a weird feeling when you're used to being the one to sort of hold the order.
Yeah. I don't quite know how to read their tone there. Like you can read them as I was suggesting, and you're sort of suggesting that they sort of have a conscious inkling that maybe they're the ones. So they're opening that door. Or you could read them as very defensive. Surely we're not blind, are we?
Yeah.
But even just the asking of that question is the barest little bit of a crack and a recognition that maybe they're not sure.
It's such an interesting question to me because I feel like the way Jesus puts it, I mean, in this equation, you kind of want to be the person who was blind before because the blind will see. And if you could see before, you'll become blind. And so I don't know how I would expect the Pharisees to put themselves into that equation, but it seems almost like it would be worse to say, we are the ones who see and we're going to become, you're going to make us blind.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I read it as the other side of the, like, they have become blind. Like they could see, now they become blind. You're
I gotcha.
The other way. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you can read it either of those two ways. Yeah. Like they thought they could see, but it turns out that they're blind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite know what to do with verse 41. If you were blind, you wouldn't have any sin. But since you say we see, your sin remains.
I see that almost as like precisely because you have been steeped in the word of God and have really committed to it and have been like, it's not that you were unaware of it. It's not that you were there was some particular barrier to you. You had every opportunity.
Yeah.
And so now you bear your guilt. Whereas someone else, maybe you couldn't have expected more. Like there were higher expectations for these guys.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So it's the not being able to see but thinking you can, and that you should be able to, and that's where the gap is. All right, Amy. I mean, on the one hand, we have this really lovely story of this man who is such a kind of endearing character who goes on this journey. We also have the story of the Pharisees who are struggling through this story and kind of coming into their own awareness or something. As you're looking at this text and thinking about what it might offer to us today, what are you thinking?
I had this whole thing I was sort of gonna say that I'm not gonna say. I'm gonna say this thing instead because I'm so moved, I think, by the straightforward truth telling of this man and maybe of his parents as well. I can't really tell from that narrator comment in there, but to just say what has happened when people ask you questions you don't know, say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then even all the way through to the end when he's in conversation with Jesus to say, I don't know who the Son of Man is. But if you tell me, then I would, will you tell me who he is?
Yeah.
And to hold that in contrast with the religious authorities who they can't put all the pieces together. Like they have pieces of the puzzle that they can't make fit. And instead of being able to say here's what we know, here's what we don't know, they just blow up the whole system. They cannot hold this incomplete understanding.
Yeah.
And if they could hold it just a little bit longer, maybe they could get the last piece, but they just can't. They can't hold it. And it's just something that I see so often in my life of faith, but also in the world in general, that if people are holding any kind of complex truth, it's not just going to fit together right away. But if you toss all the pieces out the window as soon as they don't fit together and just say we're not having this conversation and all of you are crazy, we're never going to get to more complicated truths. We have to stay in that unknowing place a little longer than feels okay. It's very uncomfortable, but I mean, I guess as you're saying, it's harder as people develop authority in the world and have a sense that they ought to know and people ought to listen to them. And, maybe it's ego, maybe it's shame, maybe it's somewhere on that ego, I don't know. But all of that just clouds out our ability to really engage what is actually true. And what is actually true is usually pretty complicated. There's a line in the Talmud that I think of often that says, teach my lips to say, I don't know. And that is, I'm appreciating this space in this story where there is, I don't know. I don't know yet. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I'm loving in this story right now.
Yeah. I love that, Amy.
What about you, Bobby?
I think I am somewhere kind of similar. I love that where you have ended there on teach my lips to say, I don't know. I think that I am relating to the Pharisees in this text, sort of establishment people, and thinking about things that are happening in Minneapolis and elsewhere, militarized law enforcement that is dragging people out of cars and doing these kinds of things. And there's this it's kind of trite, but there's this meme that's going on around on Facebook that I forget exactly what it says, but it's so suddenly you're upset that people are getting dragged out of the cars by police and getting arrested for no reason and separated from their families. And it's about time. People of color have always known that. It's about time that you woke up and saw it too. And I think I've been resonating about that with this, like, surely I'm not blind, am I? And this kind of painful awakening that takes place when you've kind of had the world backwards for a long time and thought you understood what was happening, and that the world was more or less fine. And suddenly you realize that the reason you saw it that way is because it was working for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that you have not been listening to the stories of people who have been telling you, like this man was telling them, let me tell you what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to tell you my truth. And at some point, you know, you have a choice of either you open your eyes and you realize that you thought you were seeing, but in fact you were blind, and you learn how to deal with that. Or you do what some of these religious leaders did and say, get out of my community. I'm not listening to your witness. And, you know, I feel like in some ways, this text is an invitation in this moment to say, like, admit, like you were saying, admit you do not know what you thought you knew, and listen to the testimonies of people who have been seeing things clearly for a long time. And you don't have to feel bad about it. You know, your eyes were closed. You did not know. But now that you do know, you can't say things are fine, because now you're a sinner, right?
Yeah.
But it's now you know what you know, and while the light is in the world, when the darkness is coming, you gotta fight for the light. And so let's go and do it, and trust the people who have seen longer than you, or longer than me. I don't want to put that on you. People who have seen longer than me, and go and be on the side of the light. And it involves sort of understanding that maybe, you know, I've not been able to see for a long time, and now maybe I'm just opening my eyes, but I can. And so it's very encouraging to me there too, right? You can see, there is light. You can defend that light. You can be on the side of that light, but you gotta listen to people and not be attached to your own framework.
Amen. Yeah.
All right, Amy. So we have a special episode coming up next for Ash Wednesday, where we'll be reading a little bit of John 10 and Jesus as the gate and the sheep and the shepherd. Like it's very sheepish. And
A sheep-themed reading for you. Good.
Then our next regular episode, we'll be reading John 11, which is the story of Lazarus being raised from the dead. So we've got some good stuff coming up.
Yeah.
Thanks for this conversation, Amy. I've enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it too. And I'll talk to you next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bible Worm. If you've enjoyed this free podcast, we hope you'll help us keep it going by joining our Patreon for as little as $4 per month. You can also sign up for other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for details.
Bible Worm is produced and edited by Bobby Williamson. Our theme song is sung by Colin Bagby, and our theme music is The World at Large by Dano Songs. Many thanks to all our Patreon supporters for helping make this podcast possible.
Join us next time for our special Ash Wednesday episode on John 10, 1-18, and then for our next regular episode when we'll talk about the raising of Lazarus in John 11, 1-53. Until then, keep on digging.